Okay. Um, any allegation of abuse or neglect of any resident by another person. This includes incidents of staff, visitors, any family members, anybody that comes in this building. So if it's a hospice, if it's a therapy, anybody needs to be reported within 24 hours. Any resident to resident resulting in a physical contact, verbal abuse, or intimidation, unexplained injuries such as skin tears, fractures, sprains, bruises of unknown origin, and a fall with head injury. All of those things have to be reported in a 24-hour time. So I'll finish this and we'll talk about it. This also includes fires, loss of utilities for longer than 24 hours, partial or complete evacuation resulting in a natural disaster. Management will most likely report that. You guys don't have to. In the event any of the above events are received, it is to be immediately reported to the administrator, DON, or person in charge of the facility. That person will then notify the administrator or lead administrator. The president of the governing board should be notified. The facility will thoroughly investigate the event upon receiving the complaint and take action as necessary to prevent any further happening while the investigation is in process. And then it goes through the rest of it. So, a few things with this. If you find yourself in an abuse and neglect case, whether you know it didn't happen or it happened or whatever it may be, you will be suspended. This is normal. This is every facility has to do this under the Department of Health guidelines. So please do not freak out. In the event that it's unsubstantiated, which it will be if it did not happen, you will get paid for that suspension. The only reason we have to do that is to make sure that all the residents are safe while we're investigating. We investigate these as soon as possible. So it has to be reported within 24 hours and we start our initial investigation. A lot of the times we have it done within a few hours, so it's not a big deal. But we have up to 5 days to fully investigate it. So it will never go longer than 5 days. So I just want to use this as an example because we've had some trouble. So if you go into somebody's room and answer a call late because another staff member refused to do it and it had been going off for 10 minutes, is that abuse or neglect? Yeah, that's neglect. So if somebody walks down the hall and blatantly says, I'm not going into that room because she's being rude and just doesn't answer the call late, that's neglect. You have to report that. Anything that neglects the resident's needs is reportable. So that's where those stop and watches come in. If something happened on the night shift before and you're not sure, you just aren't sure, write it on one of those stop and watches so we can investigate it. But DOH reporting needs to happen within 24 hours. It happens in all these events, so really it's a lot of events that cause DOH reporting. If you don't know if something needs to be reported or not, always call the on-call nurse because we know what needs to be reported. And if you need help reporting it, we can help you. It's an access website that we can even do from home if we need to. And that website I'll end up putting on all the computers for you. So, right, falls with head injury. Right, yeah, absolutely. But we use it all the time. Really, day shift uses it all the time because it's not uncommon for somebody to have a big bruise that's on blood thinners that we don't know where it came from, but we still have to report it. So we use that website all the time. So just make sure if you don't know if it's reportable to tell somebody and we'll figure it out for you. Any questions on 24-hour reporting? Always, always, always be a team player. But I'm telling you guys, if you see something that's not right, you don't even have to put your name on it. Just write it on that stop and watch because we need to know these things. It's the only way that we're going to keep staff accountable. Okay. I'm going to skip over staging pressure injuries until we get to the nurse stuff so that Carrie doesn't have to sit through it. So we'll take that off. Disaster and fire plan location and missing resident procedure. So this is the same thing that I just talked about. I have it on here twice, kind of, now that I look at it. This is your emergency manual. So everything that you need to know is going to be in your red book. Yeah, I mean, it's all in there. So we'll go around. I'll make sure that you guys all know where the red book's in there. But fires, floods, missing resident, abuse and neglect cases, it's all in there. So make sure with your disaster and fire plan location, you know where that red book is. You know where your crash cart is, which is in the med room. And the fire procedure, because you're going to be taking out, you know, the med carts and everything like that when the fire alarm goes off. So make sure you know where that red binder is. Fall prevention, we'll skim through this because we pretty much talked about falls in depth. These are Bethany policies on falls. I just want to, again, just kind of skim through it to make sure nobody has any questions on falls or what their role plays in falls. So our falls directly affects our star rating for our facility. I do something called minimum data assessments, and those are assessments that I give to the government, and on those assessments has whether they fall or not. So it directly affects how people look at our facility. The risk for falls are obviously the normal ones: wet floors, poor lighting, incorrect bed width. A lot of people slide off their beds. Make sure their floors are clear from clutter and they have good footwear on. Even acute medical conditions like delirium, or we talked about orthostatic hypotension when they stand up and fall. All of those medical things can really play a factor in their falls. So we do see a good percent of our falls happen within 24 hours of admission on Dakota, and that's because we're just trying to get to know the resident. So make sure that you are always overly cautious with those residents, and that any intervention that you see that can prevent a fall, you should tell us about. If the resident is experiencing delirium or confused, or they want to get up and get their cell phone all the time, anything like that, we want to try to prevent that fall as much as possible. We use a resident-centered approach, meaning we don't use the same interventions for all residents. There are very common ones, like make sure they have appropriate footwear on and that their room's not dark. But we also do their care plans around what specifically affects them. For example, Marianne's our huge fall risk, and so we need to make sure her cell phone is within reach at all times, and that's on her care plan. So we go for a resident-centered approach to make sure that the falls are being addressed correctly. And then we have a big flow sheet that you are more than welcome to see at any time. It is actually very helpful. It depicts all of our falls, and we go over it in our performance improvement meeting. I have a spreadsheet. It says every single person that fell within the last 3 months. It tells me where they fell, what time they fell, what day of the week they fell, if they fell in their room, and then it charts all that stuff for me. So I can see that right now, 67% of our falls are happening on the evening shift. And of those 60%, 89% of them are happening between 5 and 8 p.m. So we have the whole team, including our medical director, looking at those falls to see, okay, what's going on between 5 and 8 p.m. Do we need a breaker shift where somebody comes and breaks people so that we have more bodies on the floor? Or we do any interventions with that so we can see, to really bring those falls down. It's very helpful, but if you ever have anything that will contribute to it, please feel free to tell us. We are always open. And then this is our accident supervision fall risk management. This just goes through what Bethany provides to keep everybody safe. It goes through what an accident is. So an accident is an unexpected or unintentional incident which may result in an injury or an illness. And a fall refers to an unintentional coming to rest of the ground or floor. Kind of funny description, but really it's just anybody falling to the floor. So a fall without injury or an ease to the floor is still a fall. So that means if you lowered somebody to the floor, it's still considered a fall. Training. So fall prevention training, including a review of this policy procedure, will be completed as part of the general orientation and then on an annual basis. So this is our annual competency for it. The resident will be assessed on admission quarterly and annually for all other fall risks, including significant changes. So this has to do with the data assessments that I do to look at what their falls look like. So we do a pre-admission fall risk to see how they are on admission. We do fall risks with every single fall. So this is an assessment that the nurse does with every single fall to depict whether they've had medication changes, what medications are they on, has their continence status changed, anything like that. We measure that quite frequently to make sure that nothing's going on. And then CNA responsibilities when falls happen or to prevent falls. We want to make rounds at the beginning of the shift to make sure that they have all items within reach. Make sure that they're getting to meals in the appropriate manner, that they have their call lights within reach. A really big thing that I see that we need to be better at is lowering their beds in the lowest position. So David, Judy, Allison, all of those people need to be in the lowest position if they can't independently sit up and maneuver out of their bed. Even Mary Kern. Mary Kern should be in the lowest position. That way, if something happens and they roll, they don't roll 6 feet to the ground. You want their call light within reach. You want them wearing good footwear. Make sure their ambulation looks safe. So if Terry Carnes is walking down the hallway and you notice he's starting to drag his left leg really bad, tell therapy. Therapy will work with him. Nursing will work with him. Something has changed that we could probably get him stronger, but we need to know. And then we have our grab bars in the bathroom and our grab bars in the hallways to make sure people are safe. We have therapy in-house, which is an amazing resource. Please use it whenever you can. They are more than willing to help you. Meaning, if somebody's in the hallway and they're about to fall and you are right by the therapy gym, scream to therapy. They'll come out. They have more equipment than we do in this whole building in that one room to help prevent it. So make sure you're using them as a resource. And then their care plan is a good resource that has all their fall interventions on it. The family is a good resource. So if they have a lot of visitors or hospice is in-house, nurse management and nursing will most likely be talking to them to know any sort of background of why they might be falling. And then after every fall, we do a fall investigation. So we do a full investigation of what caused the fall, why the fall happened, what can we do next time to prevent the fall. It's a whole big note in their chart. And then resident safety committee, this happens quarterly. It's our QAPI committee. We go over all the quarterly falls within that time. So anything further on falls that you guys have comments, questions, any interventions about? All right. I know it's kind of like beating a dead horse, but falls and skins are the two biggest things that the Department of Health will look at and that we will want to prevent in our building. So, infection prevention. We will go through this, but I've seen you guys do it on a daily basis, so I know you guys are competent in it. This is something that got really heavy during COVID. So make sure with infection prevention, you're always wearing the appropriate PPE. We're going to do a competency on donning and doffing the PPE to make sure you're doing that correctly. And we're always going to make sure the PPE is available to you. We went over hand washing and when to do hand washing and when to do soap and water versus alcohol-based hand washing. Make sure with infection control, you are screening in at every single shift. We have actually terminated people for not screening in because it is that important, because we have had people not screen in and then come down with COVID. So make sure every single shift you are screening in, you are taking your temp, you're putting your mask and your goggles on, and you're using hand sanitizer when you come on shift. Again, with infection control, make sure you're cleaning those lifts after every use. Make sure, again, on overnights and evenings is most of the time that you can do it, but it's going to be done on every shift, is we want to clean those high-touch areas. So we should see people frequently walking up and down the halls, cleaning those handrails with purple wipes, cleaning the nurses station, cleaning the wheelchairs, cleaning the call lights, door handles, anything that's a high-touch area, clean, 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 clean. If you're sitting around, you have nothing to do, grab purple wipes and start cleaning away. End of shift checklist. This is the next thing on here, and I mentioned this earlier, but this is a new checklist that we'll be doing for every shift change. This is Jennifer's baby. She has created this, so I don't know who she's going to have do this. That is up to her, but my guess is going to be either the Bethany University people or the charge nurse. So again, we can just skim through this, but this is making sure that vitals and showers were completed, that I's and O's are completed, linen was taken out, the rooms look good. We had a complaint the other day, which was a very valid complaint and should have never happened. A resident was taken to the bathroom and the bathroom was left full of stool everywhere, and the family member came. Obviously, whoever did that, we took corrective action, but make sure we're going to start auditing bathrooms to make sure they look good. After every single brief change, those trash cans should be taken out. Nobody wants to sit in there and smell their urine. Just make sure the rooms look good. So these are going to be done at every shift change with Jennifer. Feeding and choking. So I want to go over this because we've had areas where people are on thickened liquids and they've gotten a pink water pitcher. We have started to place a sign inside of their room. We can't do it outside because that's HIPAA. There will be a sign inside of the room saying they're on thickened liquids, and the resident has to give us permission to do that. But what I want you guys to know is in this, you guys have, this is the exact thickener that we use. Is this one. I pulled it right off the manufacturer's instructions. So this is on the back of the bottle. So individual preparation, it'll tell you for 4 ounces how to make pudding thick, nectar thick, honey thick, whatever you need. It says right at the bottom for 4 ounces, you're going to do 1 full stroke for nectar thick, 4 strokes for pudding thick. Make sure you're looking at that when you're making. They should still get a jug of water. There's no reason they shouldn't. They're still going to get thirsty. They still need to stay hydrated, but make sure you're following these instructions for it. Do you guys see what I'm talking about down here? Mm-hmm. That's right on the bottle. So, and those bottles are on every single floor. So if you can't find the bottle, ask the nurse. It might most likely be in the med room. I know sometimes they keep them in the kitchenette too. So if you ever don't know, again, use therapy as your resource. We have the speech therapist in there. She's amazing at this. So make sure you're thickening this correctly. Another thing I want to say is diet cardexes. Make sure you're following those cardexes and checking them. So kitchen is one of the checks that we do. They're supposed to be checking those cardexes and giving to you whatever was supposed to be given to you. But if somebody is allergic to strawberries, we need to know that down here, and it says that on their cardex. So make sure you skim through that. Once you do it over and over again, you're going to start to notice habits, but just make sure that you're checking them every time, because we might have just found out that Anna's allergic to oranges or whatever it may be. So check those cardexes and make sure it matches the food that they have on their cart.
What happened? This happened the other night on Mary Kern's. They had like egg bake, and her top thing on her like dislike and stuff was eggs.
Okay.
What do we do in that situation?
Send it back. Send it back, and I would specifically say to the dietary aide, it says right on here she doesn't like eggs and we need to get her something different, because they should be looking at those cards before they come down. They're not perfect either, and they have a billion trays to get out, but again, once you start looking at those enough, you should notice. I mean, they should know that Mary Kern doesn't like eggs, so just send it back. I mean, you can always ask Mary and say, I see that you don't like eggs on here, but they sent this egg bake that maybe has sausage in it. Do you want to try it or no? And see what she says.
She's like, I'll just eat it with the tomato that they have on the plate. And I'm like, are you sure? I can go get you something else.
Right.
No, I'm good.
As long as they're not allergic, we can still give it to them, as long as it's a dislike. But always ask them, because we'll send it back. Okay. Sorry, I just got an email. I was looking. And then choking risks. So make sure, we want everybody to come to the dining room. We really do. I know that doesn't happen because a lot of them like eating in their room, but I would always encourage them to come. If you ever see somebody coughing while they're eating, if you ever see them swallowing odd, if their dentures aren't fitting correctly, tell your nurse managers, because we're going to tell therapy. Again, that's why we have therapy in-house. The speech therapist can come right out and tell us, yes, she's a choking hazard. No, she's not. But better to be safe than sorry. We want to make sure that they can eat. And that's why I like everybody in the dining room, so we can watch them, but it doesn't always happen. Any questions about the meal carts, about thickening, about choking?
Are we doing the same table?
Yes. I have to check when, but yes, we are.
Are we still on lockdown? On promise?
No, we should be fine. We did that for 24 hours post symptoms, that norovirus. And unfortunately, the more I hear about it, we're not the only place that got that norovirus. There's several other facilities. And so just with any infectious disease, we go on lockdown. But shouldn't be. Nail care. Tell me, when is nail care done?
Shower days.
Yes, weekly with shower days.
Or upon request.
Right. And activities will paint nails sometimes, but nail cleaning and trimming needs to be done on showers weekly. If it is not done, what's that?
Other than diabetic.
Right. If it is not done, you need to tell somebody so that we can allot it to a different person, delegate it out. So it needs to be done weeklies. We do manicures upon request, and then with showers. Residents who are diabetic and have their nails trimmed by the nurse. The staff do not do it. Activity staff, when they do painting of the nails and manicures, they don't cut their nails. So make sure you're either cutting or filing them on their shower days. Each resident should have their own nail clipper and stuff in their room. If they don't, get one. We have a billion of them in this storeroom. So, and I think they're actually even kept on promise in that end storage room with the pads. So, but each resident should have their own nail clippers and just put it in an MSS basin and label it so that we know what it is. I don't want nail clippers in with their toothbrushes. That shouldn't happen. Anything with their nails, any discoloration, nails that are missing, anything like that, notify your nurse. We'll make sure they don't have any sort of fungus or anything like that. Make sure you're always wearing gloves during nail care in case they do have a fungus. You don't want to get it. Trust me, nail fungus is horrible. It takes like years to get rid of. So make sure you're wearing gloves. Upon completion, wash your hands. Yes. Any questions about nail care? Some of the diabetics that with their toenail care, even our nurses don't do it because it's too complicated. And so we send them out to podiatry. So if you're ever trying to do somebody's toes and you do not feel comfortable with it because it's a diabetic and it's just a bad situation, let us know because we'll make sure they have a podiatry appointment coming up. The one person I think of is Arden Mind Johans. He's diabetic. He's on dialysis. He has a pressure injury on his foot. His toenails are kind of all over the place, and it's not even something we have equipment for here. So, cleaning for wheelchairs and walkers. Does everybody know when that's done? Right. So each unit has their own sheet. They should have one on Dakota 2 in the overnight book. And it tells you what days each wheelchair is cleaned. That does not mean that poor Mavis didn't dump her entire bowl of cereal in her wheelchair the day after that. So make sure if you see a wheelchair that's not cleaned to just scrub it down with a purple wipe. It doesn't take long. We just did a whole round of them a week ago and did every single one in the same day. So just make sure that they look nice, that they're cleanly, that they don't have soiled stuff all over them. So we can get them all cleaned up. Is she Jennifer? No, she's not back here. She was looking for the hospice people on Dakota. Okay, so shower room and whirlpool cleaning. Does everybody know where the whirlpool cleaning instructions are? Right. So if you ever use a whirlpool, these are posted right next to it. You can follow it literally step by step. It's not complicated, but there are a lot of steps. We do not expect you to memorize it. So just make sure that you are following this and going it. How often do you clean the whirlpool? Right. Good. We audit it, and so we audit whirlpool cleanings of the tubs. So if you're ever doing a whirlpool cleaning and Marie comes in or I come in, don't be alarmed. We're just going to audit to make sure you know what you're doing. And with this competency, every time that you do one, we'll do it just for an annual. So these are right next to the tubs. Make sure you follow it. And then I think we talked about shower room cleaning, but when do you clean it again? When does the shower room door stay closed? Kind of. It's a trick question.
Well, unless you bring the resident
No, that too. You gotta open the door for that. The shower room door. So, and we try this on Promise, and I'm always open to trying it again if you guys would like to. But that door on Promise can stay open as long as all chemicals are locked up. So we have a lock for that cabinet in there, and if all the chemicals are in that cabinet and locked, we can leave it open for residents to come in and out and get their weights done. The whole reason we have to keep that shower room door locked is so that Darlene doesn't go in there and drink all the Virex or shampoo or whatever it may be. All chemicals must be locked up if that door is open. So when does the biohazard or the soiled utility room stay locked? All the time. Mm-hmm. And that's just because the biohazards are in there and it's dirty and it's, yeah. So, okay, oxygen usage and transfer with oxygen. So we have quite a few residents on oxygen. Those oxygen concentrators, the blue ones, brown ones, we have all kinds of them, are monitored by maintenance quarterly to make sure they are still administering oxygen effectively. If somebody has an oxygen concentrator on and it's on 7 liters and they're still short of breath and it's not changing their O2 stats, change the oxygen concentrator out. Or most likely the nurse will put them on a tank. But it's not uncommon to, well, it is uncommon, but it's not unforeseeable to say that one of those concentrators is going to take a dump and not work anymore. So make sure you're using a thought process that, really depicts all areas. But with oxygen, so oxygen nasal cannulas, how often do they get changed? Twice a month. On the 1st and the 15th, the overnights do it. They change out the oxygen. If you see oxygen tubing that is older than 2 weeks, toss it and get a new one. And then we label it. So with those concentrators, some of them have humidifier cylinders and some of them don't. If it does not have one, that is okay. It means that the resident doesn't need one. But make sure those the cylinders aren't more than 3/4 the way full. You don't want them all the way up to the top full. You just want them 3/4. And then if it needs more water, we put more sterile water in there. So we have the sterile water jugs in our med room. They have their nasal cannula in every room that has an oxygen concentrator. Do you guys know what should be on the outside door? The no smoking fire sign should be on every single one, and that's because it's flammable. So if it does not have one, tell maintenance. Maintenance has those magnets. So, all right. So what are signs and symptoms of poor oxygen levels? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rapid breathing, if they're trying to breathe too fast, if they're restless and feel like they can't sit still, it's probably because they can't get their oxygen up. So, and then we can always take their O2 set. So to put oxygen on, you're going to wash and dry your hands. You're going to place an oxygen use sign on the outside of the door. You're going to remove all potentially flammable items. So if they, this would never happen, but if they had a candle in there or something, you would remove it. Unless otherwise instructed, you're going to unplug and relocate all electrical devices, meaning you don't really want your oxygen concentrators plugged in to the same as a million other outlets, and you don't want tanks next to an outlet because it's flammable, and if something sparks, you don't want it out of there. So you're going to remove any wool, blankets, again, any flammable items. You're going to turn on the oxygen. The nurse is going to put the rate at whatever the doctor ordered or do it as needed for titrate. Whether they have a mask or a nasal cannula, that'll be placed on correctly. Make sure you have gloves on when you place that. And put them in a good position that's well for them to breathe. And that's different for everybody. So if you have a super obese human being, it is not easy for them to breathe while they're laying down flat. It's actually harder for them. So you need to sit them up. So make sure they're in a position to where their airway is open and that they can get good oxygen saturation. When you're moving somebody with a blue oxygen concentrator, how do you do that? Yes. You can do it a few ways. So a lot of our residents on oxygen here are cognitive and mobile. So if they're going in their wheelchair, you can really set that oxygen concentrator in between their legs and do it both at the same time. The main thing I want you to notice is, are they short of breath to begin with? So if Loretta was just up and walking and short of breath, I don't want you to unplug her oxygen concentrator and take her to the dining room right away. You need to make sure her oxygen's up and make sure that she's breathing well before you move the whole thing with her. We have a whole oxygen room with all those tanks. Please, 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 if you ever go in there, because I know you go in there for shower chairs and stuff, every tank needs to be in a slot on the rack. No tank can just be out floating willy-nilly about. They all need to be in a slot on the rack. Use of oxygen concentrator. Let me see if this says anything I need to know. I don't think so. Make sure the tubing isn't kinked. Make sure it's not too short. We have all kinds of tubing. If they need longer tubing, we can get it. And then the nurse will adjust the flow as needed. CNAs should never adjust the flow of oxygen unless delegated by a nurse. So you don't go in there and say, oh, hey, I didn't realize that she was only on 2 liters. Let me pump her up to 5 because she looks like she needs it. Nope, the nurse needs to do that. So if a nurse tells you, hey, go turn Ruth Lemon up to 6 liters, you can do that. That's fine. All right, CPAP and BiPAP. I've seen you guys do these. The problem is they're not getting done. So my concern isn't the fact that you don't know the competency of the steps of doing it. It's that they're not getting put on. And I'm not quite sure why. I have to do some investigating with that. I think some of them are because residents refusing. But we need to be documenting that somewhere. So does everybody know what a CPAP is for? Right. Continuous pressure blowing into them so that their oxygen stays up through the night. Does everybody know the difference between a CPAP and a BiPAP? Uh-huh. So a CPAP only blows air in. A BiPAP blows air in and then sucks it back out. So the resident, ideally, before putting one of these masks on, should be NPO for 2 hours prior. It doesn't always happen. Residents aren't always compliant with it, but this is just so they don't have an emesis in their mask and choke to death, pretty much. CPAPs are used so that they get oxygen throughout the night. They're used for anybody with airway obstructions. They're used for all kinds of reasons. Swallowing difficulties, hypotension. Some people use them just because the epistaxis, so their tongue goes back and they snore too much. But the main outlook of the CPAP on all levels, no matter what the cause of it is to make sure that you have good air saturation. So side effects of a CPAP can be if they get too claustrophobic with it on. They can have sleep disturbances because nobody likes sleeping with a huge blowing mask on their face until they get used to it. Headaches, dry mouth, sore throat, nosebleeds. This is all because air is blowing in them all the time. Now, all CPAP machines have a moisturizer tank on them. Please make sure when you're putting those CPAPs on at nighttime that has fluid in it, that it's not empty. And then every morning, sorry, my carrot's stuck in my throat. I'm going to choke. Maybe. Okay. Was touch and go for a second. Okay, so make sure when you are putting the CPAPs on that they have fluid in the chamber, and make sure when you're taking them off in the morning that you are rinsing out the tubing and the mask. You want them cleaned every morning. Make sure you're cleaning it with soapy water. We have Dawn dish soap next to their sinks so that you guys can clean it with that, so that you make sure it's not all gunky in the morning. I need to